Conversation on race and policing began in response to the police killing of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. In this partnership between CSU San Bernardino and the Brennan Center for Justice, we hope to engage in ongoing discussions related to the history and current context of race, policing, and criminal justice with guests from diverse academic fields and backgrounds. Thank you. My name is Stan Futch, and I would like to thank you for joining us on Conversation on Race and Policing. You've just seen the film Breaking Barriers with Danny Murillo. Before we get started, I'd like to read the land acknowledgement. CSUSB acknowledgement. We recognize that California State University San Bernardino sits on the territory, ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, Yahuamatam. We recognize that every member of the California State University San Bernardino community has been benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold California State University San Bernardino more accountable to the needs of American Indians and Indigenous peoples. Now I'd like to pass it to Matt Patino.
We are honored today to have Danny Murillo join us for the conversation on race and policing. Danny is one of the co-founders and associate directors of the Underground Scholars Institute at UC Berkeley. He leads their recruitment efforts through the Underground Scholars Ambassadors and Incarcerated Scholars Program. He also supports the Wellness and Career Pillars. He is originally from Norwalk, the one-way streets neighborhood, and was born to Mexican parents from Zacatecas. Danny was the Smart Justice Fellow at the Michelson 20 Million Minds Foundation, where he convened the Smart Justice Think Tank, a coalition of higher education champions, which directly impacted leaders to establish California's best practices, serving as a common agenda for the field of higher education in prison and supporting formerly incarcerated students on campus in California. Danny is also part of the Campaign for College Opportunity as their program analyst and was the primary author of their report, The Possibility Report, From Prison to College Degrees in California. He's also the program analyst at the Vera Institute of Justice, has worked on nationwide higher education prison projects, was the research and program analyst at California Corrections to College, a project focused on educational equity and creating access to higher education for currently and former incarcerated people. In 2013, Danny was the media representative for the Prison Hunger Strike Solidarity Coalition, which supported the Short Corridor Collective, a group of incarcerated men organizing a statewide prison hunger strike to end the practice of long-term solitary confinement. His work has appeared in GQ Magazine, La Opinion, National Public Radio, New York Magazine, The Appeal Podcast, Univision, and 60 Minutes with Oprah. Danny is also the recipient of the John W. Gardner Fellowship for Public Service and the Soros Justice Advocacy Fellowship. And recently, he was selected as the recipient of the 2024 Global Freedom Fellowship. Danny Murillo, welcome to this week's conversation on race and policing.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here.
So as a San Bernardino, or excuse me, a Santa Barbara parent, I will refrain from making any references to Berkeley. Please tell us about your work.
For sure. So yes, currently I'm the associate director at Berkeley Underground Scholars, a support program for formerly incarcerated students. Most of my work is centered around the recruitment of formerly incarcerated and system impacted being students who may not have direct incarceration experience, but are somehow impacted by incarceration through the incarceration of a parent or a sibling, It's that sort of kind of we believe that that also impacts people for those that are not incarcerated. So we also include family members with incarcerated family members into our program. But anyways, most of my work revolves around recruiting formerly incarcerated system impacted community college students. I work, the ambassador program is a leadership program for students in community college. And then we also serve incarcerated students who are taking college courses in prison. We provide academic advice and transcript analysis and kind of provide a pathway into the University of California, Berkeley. That's the work that I do, but Underground Scholars has multiple programs that we also offer, right? But I have other staff members that kind of carry that weight, right? But overall, the purpose of the goal of our mission is to create alternatives to incarceration through higher education and supporting those who have been directly impacted to be able to get admissions into the university and using education as a tool for self-transformation of self and community.
So how is USI different or similar to Project Rebound?
We're born, based on the work that Project Rebound was doing in San Francisco, right? When we first started Underground Scholars at Berkeley, when we even came up with the idea of wanting to create something, the very first thing that we did was reach out to Jason Bell, who is still there now, and their colleague Ayrton Morales, who used to work at Project Rebound, and they pretty much came to our space and kind of advised us on what we needed to create a space, right? I guess what I would say is the difference, there are some differences, right? Like, the Project Rebound, they can work more closely with admissions to kind of, get people in through, certain procedures that unfortunately we haven't been able to do that here at the UC. It's a little bit more stricter when it comes to the admissions. Like we really want everybody to kind of complete all of their requirements. I know that at the CSUs, they have been a little bit more lenient where they allow students to come in while they're finishing some of their transfer requirements. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that. So I would say that Project Rebound, in some capacity has an advantage in terms of like working with people getting students in. But I would say with Underground Scholars, what the difference for us is that we, at least when it comes to our programming, we really think holistically from, recruiting people into the university to thinking about career services and opportunities along the way as they're transitioning out. So we have it's a five tier model, or a 5-pillar model is recruitment, retention, advocacy, wellness, and career services. And each pillar has multiple programming that are dedicated to the well-being of our students and those that we're trying to recruit.
Jeremy?
Thanks, Matt, and thank you, Danny, for joining us. I just wanted to do a quick sort of point of order. We welcomed in Dr. Annika Anderson from the Sociology Department. Annika leads our Project Rebound here on campus, and it was Annika who made this event possible in the Sociology Department and the Project Rebound. So I saw that Annika was joining us, and I wanted to make sure just to give her a shout out, and also Annika, just to say thank you for making this event possible, and please jump in with any thoughts, any questions, comments. But thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you for organizing this event. I just really wanted to quickly say, thank you for all the great work that you've been doing with this series. And Danny Murillo, I mean, I've been following his work for many, many years. I've known you for almost a decade. And so he does a lot of things in so many different spaces. Just thank you for joining us, really. And that's it. I'll give the stage back to you.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for being here, Danny. One of the things I saw in the video was a lot of emotions.
Yes.
There's a lot of, and I'm sure that's one of the main things a lot of the people you're working with, and Annika, the same thing, that people are, graduation's huge.
Mm-hmm. Talk
about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a milestone for people, right? One of the things that, we try to focus on when we bring people to the university, we're about to host our new orientation for our new class of students that are coming in for the fall, right? And when we bring them into this orientation, we try to be very intentional in setting a tone where, it's like a rite of passage, right? You're coming into a space I believe any university, right, offers ample opportunities for people that take advantage of it, right? You can go to any university and walk out of it dissatisfied because you didn't take advantage of the resources that are available. And so for us, we're very intentional with our students, like, yo, we want you to take advantage of all the resources, and this is what's available, so that when you do graduate, you're as prepared as possible for that next step. Because a lot of times when students graduate, they don't make that investment into focusing, making those connections. And then those 2 years, 3 years pass because we're transfer students. We come in 2 years, 3 years, and we're out the door. And it's like, whoa, I didn't take the time to build my network, right? So for us, we try to invest our time to make sure that students do that, so that when they do graduate, they're ready for the next step, right? And that graduation, making sure that as they're preparing to graduate, we give our students a stipend of $1,500. It's not much, but something to kind of help them, as they're on their way out the door. Also trying to build up our alumni network, make sure that they're connected with other opportunities, whether it's going to be grad school or career opportunities. But it is, it's a big step for most people, because to a certain extent, institutions similar to, higher education institutions similar to prison institutions can be places where, we get used to being here, right? And then when it's time to transition out, and if you don't prepare, it can also disrupt your whatever plans you had moving forward, right? So for us, it's important to support our students to be prepared for that next step, that comes after graduation.
And Danny, talk a little bit about, because I know you graduated, but the effects on the family.
For sure. When I came home from prison, when I was in prison, my little brother and my nephew would write me telling me that they wanted to follow in my footsteps. This was maybe 3 or 4 years before coming home. I'm in solitary confinement, Pelican Bay State Prison. My brother and my nephew are 12 and 13 years old, talking about they want to follow in my footsteps. And, that was a big catalyst for making the change in my life, for wanting to do something different, right? Because I didn't want my little brother and my nephew to end up in the same place I did. And, when I came home, I'm trying to be a positive male role model to both of them. And they're not really trying to listen to what I have to say, right? They were hoping I came back the same person that went in there, right? And, for quite some time, maybe about for 2.5 years, they were in and out, getting in trouble. When I finally transferred to Berkeley after coming home 2.5 years later, I moved them up with me to Berkeley, because I know that there's not a lot of opportunities in our community, right? And at Berkeley, it's, even though they're not students, there's still opportunities for them to make connections, right? Through me, right? And that's pretty much what happened, right? Through me, they were able to meet other people. They were able to make new friends. And that was in 2015. Between 2015 to 2018, my little brother and my nephew, even though they were living with me in Berkeley, would still go back to the neighborhood, get arrested. They ended up, my nephew went to prison during that time. My brother got arrested for a gun. And around 2018, 2017, my little brother and my nephew, they just got it. For some reason, something snapped in them and they got it. My little brother is now doing his master's program here at UC Berkeley, a master's in public policy. And my nephew, he works for UC Berkeley as a cook, and is currently studying culinary arts with the intention of transferring either to Cal-Poly Pomona for their BA in restaurant management, either or Cal State Long Beach, or possibly Cal State East Bay for their BA in restaurant management. So, education for me, again, as I said, is not just transformative for the individual, but also for our community, and in this case, my family.
Fantastic. Annika, would you like to tell us a story about your successes?
I think I'm good.
I'm trying to get you in here.
I'll
Mike had
jump
his
in at
hand up
some
there.
point.
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Great, thanks, Dan. I mean, it's so impressive that you're doing what you can, Danny, to ease the path that you had to figure your own way how to get through it. But what do you see as existing obstacles, or are there new obstacles that are being created that are the most important to try to dismantle that perhaps we or the audience can help with?
I think one thing is, the careers that our students want to get into, right? a lot of these careers also still come with licensing barriers, right? So for me, I work in higher education. I don't encounter any licensing barriers, right? But for people that want to be psychiatrists or psychologists that need that clinical psychology license, right, to be able to practice, right, to do private practice, those are still barriers. And in California, I believe there's over 50 bureaus that offer some type of licensing for whether it's haircuts, for plumbing, for electrician, to being a lawyer, to being a medical doctor. So these licensing barriers, and they all have their own barriers, right? They're not, it's not uniform, it's not a uniform policy across the board, right? There's different barriers for different licensing, right? And so for us is, at least for me in academia, like I have to be informed, like what careers have those barriers so that I can inform my students as they're making selections in terms of what major they want to study, right? I think also, understanding these things can be changed, right? They can be changed and they can be removed. For instance, at UC Berkeley, there was a barrier for us to be able to be employed after graduation, and having a conversation with HR and explaining to them, like, we can get in debt to get an education at Berkeley, but we can't get a job to pay that debt. And and it was a very small conversation that we had with them, and they automatically said, you know what, that makes sense. Let's remove the question if you've been convicted of a crime from the application, right? And so they initiated this ban the box policy that then had a trickle effect across all the UCs, and they removed that box. So now it's not, we still get asked, and they still have to run a clearance on us, right? But they don't ask us at the beginning anymore, right? Where that question discourages a lot of people from even applying.
Right. Right. Right.
Go ahead, Matt.
Danny, I have a question. I have met some formerly incarcerated people at Crafton Hills College, which is a community college. And so my question is, at what point are you contacting or making contact with formerly incarcerated? Is it starting once they're released and in a community college? Is it starting in the system earlier? Is
Yeah,
it starting a
both.
transfer?
Yeah, we have our incarcerated scholars program. So students that are incarcerated right now throughout California, primarily throughout California, that are enrolled in mostly community college programs, are writing to us, and they want to know, like, what is the transfer pathways to Berkeley or to the UC system. So we are in contact with people while they're incarcerated, and we stay, and if they reach out to us after they get released, then we stay in contact with them. Also, we connect with the Rising Scholars programs, right? So I'm in contact with different community college programs throughout the community college system, which is the Rising Scholars Network. And I share, I have a listserv where, I share information with them about the ambassador. Like right now, we're doing recruitment for our ambassador program. And we share information about, I'll send them a link like, hey, I'm doing recruitment. Here's the application. Share it with your students. And sometimes students will reach out to us directly as well.
Thank you.
Annika?
Hi, yes, it's Anika. I just wanted to chime in because again, I'm familiar with your work. Can you tell us a little bit about what went into some of the reports that you put together? So for example, and I'll drop this in the chat, you did this really groundbreaking work that for people who wanted to really start doing reentry work in the community, but also on college campuses. This was kind of what it was like, before we had publications or All Out Project Rebound, for example, this is what I turned to really give me some information. And so thank you for that report. I know you have a couple of other reports. Can you talk to us a little bit about the work that it took to kind of put that together?
For sure. Thank you. So this report, the possibility report, came out of a grant from the Art for Justice Fund. And what happened was that I was working with Corrections to College from 2016 to 2019, and our program was pretty much over. But the Art for Justice grant wanted to continue to fund us, and we decided to take a small portion of their funding to create a report. And they really wanted to highlight students' experiences in higher education, formerly incarcerated students. And so the thought was that we were going to do qualitative, data collection either one-on-one with students, but we ended up deciding to do focus groups. We did focus groups with three clusters of three groups of students: community college students, CSU students, and UC students, and pretty much just had conversation with them about their experiences in higher education, the barriers and opportunities that they encountered, and that process, that putting that report together, was interesting because it was also during COVID, right? And one of the things that came out was not even about the concern was not even about the formerly incarcerated students, but more the incarcerated students, right? And one of the things that came out of that was the Student Bill of Rights, right? As I was working on this report, we're talking about formerly incarcerated students, and the question is like, well, what about incarcerated students? And because there was a shift from in-person to correspondence because of COVID, we thought about creating a policy that was titled the Student Bill of Rights, Incarcerated Student Bill of Rights, and making sure that students in prison also had some type of protections in their education, right? And one of the things that came out of that was that any education program that's going to go into a prison has to be a public institution or some type of accredited program. It can't be a for-profit program, right? And so I really appreciated that because, I think through a lot of times when we do things for profit, it kind of waters stuff down where it's just more like how many people can we get into the program and not what's the content that we're delivering, right? And with public institutions, I think we have an opportunity to kind of have more oversight in terms of like what is the curriculum that's being offered to them, So I think that's one of the good things that came out of the report, right? And the other report, other good things that came out of the report was just really understanding what are the barriers that folks are encountering. I'm 15 years removed from being a formerly incarcerated person, right? And it's very different from someone that just got released today, right? Those barriers are going to be different. And so I think it was important to highlight what those barriers were at that particular moment in time.
Danny, one of the students in the video mentioned that they preferred failing the class rather than face the stigma. So I'm curious what USI offers academically on campus to those students who are struggling.
For sure, we hire tutors in our program. For the most part, most of the tutors that we have in our program are focused on writing, right? UC Berkeley and universities are heavily focused on writing. But also, if there's a student that's encountering, learning barriers around stats or some type of, math-related subject, then we'll hire specific tutors for that subject for those students, right? So if students are facing a specific barrier in a class, we'll hire tutors. If they need more time in testing, we encourage them to apply to the Disabled Student Program, which is a program for those students that are facing physical or psychological disabilities, right? They give you extra time on testing. They give you a private room to take your test and other accommodations to make it easier on you. So we really try to encourage our students to either take advantage of the resources that we offer with additional tutoring or take advantage of the resources that are offered through other programs that will accommodate them in their learning disadvantages.
You mentioned your younger brother and your nephew, and having them move away from Norwalk up to the Bay Area. Is location, does that correlate to success, or have you seen that?
I think in some cases it very much does. My little brother and my nephew, they were very much in love with the streets, so removing them from that, and putting them in a different environment, an environment also, one thing that I told them, you're at university, there's a lot of young people here. They like to party, they like to drink, they like to smoke, they like, people hang out and but yet pay attention to what they do.
Mhm.
They do it Friday to Saturday or Thursdays to Saturdays, Sundays, but yet Monday through Thursdays, they're focused on their responsibilities as students. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with, having some fun on the weekend, but, throughout the rest of the week, like folks are focused on what they got to do. You know what I mean? And that was a way for them to kind of create some structure in their life, right? Seeing other people doing it. I used to bring my brother with me to class, have him with me sitting in class. At first, he didn't like it, right? But after a while, he kind of got used to it and he got into the material and he was able to grasp the material, which inspired him to, go back to school. He started with his high school adult basic education, got his adult high school diploma, and then went to Berkeley City College, where, it took him a while to get it, but once he did, like, he just became an outstanding student, graduated from Santa Barbara with a double major and honors, a 4.0 in sociology and political science. And so I definitely think the environment had a big factor, right? Especially the community that we were able to create through underground scholars, right? Him, my brother, and my nephew being able to coexist with people that have similar experiences, but yet are now focused on and have a new outlook on life, And I think that was part of the motivation for them to be able to change.
And success had to have a motivating factor for them also, right? Watching you succeed.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think so, and that, and also, them seeing me apply for scholarships. UC Berkeley has an abundance of resources when it comes to research scholarships. We got scholarships that give students up to $15,000 for an academic year, And so I've got multiple of those scholarships, right? And then being able to see that, was also motivating. Like, they're giving you $10,000 for you to do a research project for a year. All right. Like, that's, that's motivating to some people,
And how many colleges, let's say California, have this kind of program?
Every UC program that offers undergraduate degrees. So every UC except for the University of California Law School, which used to be UC Hastings, and UC San Francisco Medical School. Everything else, we have an underground scholars program. I believe the Cal State, correct me if I'm wrong, Annika, is about 20 programs right now, give or take, right?
It's about 19 or 20 last I checked.
Yeah. And I think that a total of 23 campuses of Cal State, I believe, if I'm correct. And then the community colleges, that the number always fluctuates. They're like 112 to 115, but I believe there's about 70 to 80 programs on campus and in prison serving incarcerated students and formerly incarcerated through the community college system.
Fantastic. Michael?
Danny, can you tell us a little bit about the Prison Hunger Strike Solidarity Coalition, and particularly, obviously student protest has been a tradition across the United States, but at Berkeley in particular, and now we're seeing kind of a crackdown on student activism in a way that's quite troubling. Can you tell us about the difference as a formerly incarcerated person being involved in some kind of activism on campus?
Right. No, definitely, when it came to doing that type of activism work on campus as a student, I was always mindful of like what were my limitations, right? Because I am someone that still has 2 felony convictions, right? And I was always mindful, like, okay, once things turn left, or once things go, towards more like the violence, like I it was my responsibility to like extract myself from situations like that. But I did participate in multiple organizing activities on campus as a student when I was part of the Prison Hunger Strike Solidarity Coalition, which was a coalition of, family members, directly impacted people, lawyers, students, union workers, what have you, that were part of a coalition that were supporting the men in solitary confinement to bring an end to long-term solitary confinement in California prisons. Mind you, around this time in 2015, the policy was that if you're in prison and you're in solitary confinement labeled as a gang member or an associate, you're there indefinitely. It doesn't matter if you committed a violent act or not. If you're serving a life sentence, you are there indefinitely unless you have a parole date, or you what they call debrief, or you give up information and become a state witness or whatever. And that was the only way to be released from solitary confinement. I had a parole date, so I knew when I went to solitary confinement that I was coming home, but I also left solitary confinement knowing that a lot of people weren't coming home. And so when the hunger strikes started happening, I was outside when these hunger strikes started. I was in 2011, the first one started. I was still on parole. I was in community college. I was still living in Norwalk. I did not get involved in the first or second hunger strike. for fear of being labeled gang activity. It wasn't until I got to Berkeley that I got involved in the third hunger strike and then got involved in the organizing as a student, right? And at that time, I was no longer on parole, so I didn't have that fear, like, okay, I can't get involved. But yeah, as soon as I was off parole, I offered my services, and my services was really just sharing my story in solitary confinement and the conditions of that experience. And one thing I realized out of that experience was that I needed help, a lot of psychological help. Every time I spoke about that experience, for some reason, I was just depressed. I would stay in bed for like hours. I just would stay immobile, right? And that really prompted me to really start a mental health and a self care program for myself. Going to therapy, going to yoga, going to whether it's acupuncture, just doing different things that really allowed me to kind of take control of my anxiety and the depression that I didn't know was a result of that experience in solitary confinement and just experience of incarceration and all of the other traumatic experiences throughout my life as well.
So you went directly from solitary confinement to going home.
Yes. I was released from, I went from Pelican Bay State Prison. I was transferred sometime like in January 10th of 2010. And then I got transferred to Lancaster State Prison, where I stayed in administrative segregation for about a week until my parole officer came, picked me up, and drove me home. Right. I got drove home in handcuffs and got released. They take you to your house and then they uncuff you. And that's only for people that are getting released from solitary confinement.
That must have been quite a culture shock, other kinds of shock as well.
No, definitely. When I came home, everything just seemed so big, like, but what's interesting was, like, I remember walking into my house, my mom's house, and it felt so tiny. Like, it just felt so tiny. And then I realized, like, okay, all my life I've been in these huge buildings, right? Like, prison buildings are huge, right? With big, with high roofs and stuff. And it just being in that house, it just, everything felt so small. But outside, like, it just, I was no longer confined by these four walls, right? And everything just felt so, so big. And it's like, to a certain extent, it was intimidating. It was intimidating. And for me, one thing that I told myself was coming home, like, I'm taking baby steps. I'm not going to rush into things. A lot of times we want to rush into things and we want to do everything that we missed out on, right? And a lot of times that could be overwhelming for us. And it can also put us in a state of, like, especially if we're not able to accomplish the things that we set out to do, leave us, like, in, feeling hopeless, right? So for me, it was like, I'm not going to put this pressure on myself. I'm going to take things slow, just getting my driver's license, getting my social security, or small accomplishments, that I was kind of going along the way. And little by little, these little accomplishments turned into bigger accomplishments. I was on the dean list in community college. I was a keynote speaker. I got accepted to Berkeley, and so on and so forth,
And does the state provide any kind of treatment or assistance for people who have been exposed to that solitary?
Not really. I will say, though, that now, years later, when I first came home, the Department of Rehabilitation wasn't really offering services the way they are now, right? But I have now benefited from the Department of Rehabilitation, right? They offered me support with my master's degree, actually paid my tuition, or for whatever financial aid didn't cover, they helped me pay the tuition, and they help with other services as well, right? When I first came home, they were really focused more on vocational support and also, like, supporting you around your disabilities. But now they offer a lot more educational support. They're helping people pay for their bachelor's and their master's degrees, or their graduate school. So that's, like, support that was, like, useful. For me, some colleges and universities offer mental health support. But there's also, like, for a lot of us that are formerly incarcerated, we still haven't really accepted the fact that we need that support, especially for men. It still comes with, like, a stigma of being a sign of weakness, right? To say, you know what, I do need mental health support. I went through a traumatic experience. but sometimes we don't acknowledge it as that, and we're like, that's just a sign of weakness if I choose to go to mental health services. But it's really not. I mean, it's like it's actually a sign of strength to understand when you do need support, right? Because it takes a lot of courage to be able to ask for that support. So to say that it's a weakness, I would disagree. Now I would disagree. Before I used to, be on the opposite side, right? But now knowing what I know and knowing that, with the education that I receive, that, incarceration and the things that lead to incarceration are traumatic experiences that we as formerly incarcerated people have a responsibility to address, right? Because if not, then we're going to continue to carry those that trauma with us, and it's going to impact our other relationships.
Right.
Danny, your resume and your plate's pretty full, but what's your plans for the future? What would you like to see continue in what you're doing, and where would you want to see yourself in the future?
So currently I'm doing work in Mexico. I'm doing work that I started doing some work in Mexico around 2021, right around COVID. I met a graduate student who's now a professor, Dr. Cepeda, at the University of Guadalajara, who found out about the work of underground scholars, and he wanted to figure out a way how to support people that are being deported to be able to continue their education in Mexico. And so right now I'm working with my colleague to try to create a pathway for people that are studying right now in prison and are going to facing deportation, trying to create a pathway for them to continue their education either in a Mexican institution or some type of virtual program with universities in the United States. We're actually organizing a conference. I'm organizing a conference on the 23rd of April that is titled Building Bridges, a transnational conference on incarceration, deportation, and higher education. What I would like to come out of this, besides establishing a pathway for people to continue their education, and not just thinking about people who are being deported and education, but also thinking of people that are being deported who are interested in finding a career. So we also want to think about what kind of career vocational trainings we can offer to people, right? That they can start a career in Mexico. And so for me, what I would love to do is hopefully be able to turn this project in Mexico into a job, because I do really see myself wanting to move to Mexico and live in Mexico and work in Mexico, just because of the fact that, I have family in Mexico, and I have Mexican citizenship. There's just something about being over there that just, when I'm there, my immune system is just a lot more relaxed as compared to when I'm over here. I don't know why, but I find being outside of the country a lot more sensitive to my to my needs when it comes to my anxiety and my depression. I really enjoy being in Mexico, and I want to turn that into a job.
Well, good for you. Great. Well, thank you, Danny, for coming and joining us, and we just had a great conversation. That was a good video. A lot of good things going on with you and in your life, and hopefully all your future dreams will come true. So thanks again for joining us, and hope to see you again with your Mexico report.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, and thank you for everything.
Thanks very much. It's great. Really appreciate it.
Conversation on Race and Policing has been supported by funding from the California State University, San Bernardino College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, Fall Library, and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Finn Lee is our technical consultant. Pamela Crossan provides administrative support, and Alan Yorva provides communication support. There's more information in the show notes, and please join us online at csusb.edu/CORP for upcoming programming, and find our catalog of over 100 past events with guests like Robin D.G. Kelly, Jamal Bowman, and Dorothy Roberts, and many more.